evening, we're with Paul Villinski, and he has created studio and large-scale artworks for more than 3 decades. And we talked a little bit about that at the beginning because he's published a beautiful book, which is available in our museum shop, and it is, gorgeous in terms of showcasing, Paul, your work. Congratulations again. I mean, I'll just, it doesn't do justice on Zoom to see, but there's photograph after photograph, as well as text about, your accomplishments and your works across the country that are been shown in exhibitions, but also purchased by collectors. So you've done large scale works for more than 3 decades. Born in York, Maine in 1960, son of an Air Force navigator, lived and worked in New York City since 1982, and a scenic route through the educational system, which included stops at Phillips Exeter Academy and the Massachusetts College of Art, and a BFA with honors from the Cooper Union for the Advancement of Science and Art in New York in 1984. Paul lives with his partner, Amy Park, and we'll be able to see some of her work as well later in the tour, and their son, Lark. He just turned 10 last week, Paul was talking about, and we'll see him in many places. He'll come up during our tour, and they live in Queens and upstate New York. Notable exhibitions include a mid-career survey, Paul Villinski Farther, and we're going to go ahead and screen share at this point in time to show that. That was at the Taubman in 2017. I know that most of us on this Zoom call remember and saw the works, and Marfa right there on the left-hand side is actually on view now at the museum as part of In a Decade, and that was a gift from Paul to our permanent collection. So your voice continues at the museum, Paul, as we get to enjoy that piece. And any comments on Farther, Paul, as we see this on the screen?
Well, having the exhibition there was a real highlight for me, both in terms of my career and just personally in terms of the wonderful experience working with you all at the museum. And you have such gorgeous exhibition spaces, so it was just a delight to have my work contextualized by the museum and present in that very beautiful gallery there. And I can't believe it's been 3 years already. I can't believe it was 2017. I mean, it somehow feels more recent to me than that.
Well, I think it feels more recent to us too, because we enjoyed not only Farther and Passage, but we enjoyed the Flower Bomber, and that's our next screen, where it was on view in the atrium just until this past spring. It came down right at the beginning of March. Actually, it was headed to San Francisco, and there's beautiful images in your new book that include Flower Bomber. So thank you for highlighting that. It's just an incredible piece.
Thank you. This sculpture seems to have had a really kind of curious and interrupted life, both in terms of having been stolen just before it was meant to be installed and then recovered a week later. And then, we took it down from the museum for an exhibition in San Francisco at the San Francisco Art Fair, which was canceled within a few weeks of having taken it down. So it's it's had this kind of checkered history so far, but we'll see what happens next with it.
That's true. So where it is headed next, we don't know. But it was just such a key installation in our space, and a talking highlight while it was in the atrium. And you're an avid pilot of gliders and single engine airplanes. Metaphors of flight and soaring often appear in Paul's work. And with a lifelong concern for environmental issues, Paul's work frequently repurposes discarded materials, affecting surprising and poetic transformations. And with that, we're going to start our tour with Paul.
Thank you so much, Cindy. What a nice introduction. um, so I took this kind of curated cribs idea quite literally when Cindy asked me about it, and what I thought I would do is basically give you some introduction to my studio, such as it is right now, and then show you around our house here in the Catskills. This is an image of my studio in Long Island City, Queens, that I have lived and worked in since 1984. This is a neighborhood in Queens that is being rapidly gentrified right now, but back in the 80s, it was being colonized by artists and musicians. And this particular loft was first inhabited in 1979 by a couple of members of the band The Talking Heads, Tina Weymouth and Chris Frantz, who are very well-known musicians. I took it over from them in 1984 and worked there until, well, I'm still working there, but a year or so ago, we moved into our house upstate here in the Catskills, about 90 miles from New York City. When the pandemic arrived in New York, which it did rather devastatingly, we really just took up residence here full time. And so I'm in the process of trying to purchase a building in the little village of Ellenville, where we live now, to move my studio here. But in the meantime, I am kind of working between this space and what should be our dining room in our house here. I call it my dining room studio. So let's look at the next image. This is another space that I had for a number of years, also in Long Island City, a block away. Let's go to the next image.
And I think at one time you had 3 studios going at the same time. Is that correct, Paul?
That's correct. Yeah, 3 separate spaces. Mm-hmm. I was kind of at a point where we were doing lots and lots of projects, and I had assembled this team of many assistants to help me, and it was quite a it really was quite a little industry going on there. We were doing numerous public art projects, and then close to 24 site-specific commissioned butterfly installations in homes and businesses around the country and sometimes overseas. And so I had this big team of people working with me, which was exciting for a number of years. I've now condensed my practice, and I have just one assistant, and I'm enjoying that very much as well. It's quite a thing to try to keep a bunch of people going, 40 hours a week. It really turns into a business, and that's not really what I had in mind when I went off to art school. Next image. So in addition to working in the studio, as I mentioned, I do a lot of work outside of the studio, doing public art projects and site-specific installations. So this would be a project where I would spend 4 or 5 days working on that hydraulic lift, and this was up in Michigan at the University of Michigan's Mott's Children's Hospital. Next. And this is again, working, it seems like a great deal of the work I do somehow involves lifts or ladders, which activates my fear of heights nicely. But this was working at the White Plains Hospital in Westchester. Next.
And Paul, when you're doing those installations, the 3 that we were just seeing in these slides, like this one, are you marking the wall first? Talk about that process as you're also having different people work and install each of the butterflies.
Well, typically I spend some time in the space and really feel it out, and you know, generally arrive at a pretty clear idea of what it is I want to do, and I'll normally make sketches, compositional sketches, in in a sketchbook, and sort of figure out what the skeleton of the piece should be. And then I will often mark out the wall with tape in order to kind of create that skeletal structure that I can work on. And then when I'm working with assistants, what I have figured out I can do is tape these butterfly elements up to the wall, and then let the assistants follow me and install them in the position that I've assigned by taping them up into place. So that's kind of how I work with assistants on the installations. And in that image, you can see some of the tape indicating where I'm going to place the pieces. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so that's the finished installation. And then sometimes I work, another place that I'll work besides my own studio is in other people's shops. And this is a fabricator, a machinist and fabricator studio in Brooklyn. And this is a sculpture that, was mostly assembled in my studio. And then we moved into his shop so that we could do some specialized machining of components for these flying bicycle sculptures that I did for the New York City Parks Department. Next. And here's a shot of the finished installation of what I call the Sky Cycles. They're 3 flying bicycles, and they're highly articulated and operational. So with these bicycles, when you pedal, the propellers are driven through a series of chain drives or pulleys and belts, and all the control surfaces operate when you turn the handlebars, the ailerons deflect. Because I'm a pilot, I know enough about the mechanics, the basic mechanics of aircraft, so that I could give these pieces some pretty realistic features like that. And the idea here was to make them to make them believable enough so that people were left wondering if they were actual flying machines or just what they were, to get them in that space between art and life where people weren't quite sure what they were. And I knew I had succeeded when some engineering types I know took a look at these things and said, "Those don't fly, do they?" They actually weren't sure if they were real flying craft or not. So that's exactly where I wanted these things to land as a strategy for getting people to engage with them. I think we have one more shot of those. Oh, wow. So that's taken from the exterior of the building, and this is a huge track and field facility on Staten Island in the city. So that's looking from the outside into the building. And
is that a permanent installation?
It is. It was a New York City Percent for Art project. So these are expected to last as long as the building does.
Great.
So with any luck, my grandchildren will be able to go there and see what their grandfather did. Next. So another place that I have worked as an artist is here. This was a neotropical Lepidoptera field course in Peru, on the Amazon in Peru. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is that my practice as an artist isn't just confined to quietly working away in a white room somewhere, but this was a kind of research trip that I took, where I went and took this field course in the jungle in the Amazon with 5 of the leading butterfly specialists in the world. Next. And that was an outgrowth of this project that I did start in the studio, which was to breed live butterflies. So I had an idea for a sculpture, and there's an image of it to come. But the idea was to basically make an image of a human figure that was filled with living butterflies, and have the figure kind of exhale the butterflies into a gallery space. And I decided that the most interesting way to do that would be to actually breed the butterflies, to go out and catch female butterflies native to New York, and to breed them in the studio. Next.
And how many years did you do that, and how many species?
This went on for nearly 3 years, and at various points I had standing colonies of 6 different species of butterflies, all native to the city. And that it sounds easier than it is. I mean, one of the great challenges for me was actually growing the plants that the butterflies require as their host plants. And basically the butterfly life cycle is that the adult females lay their eggs on a very specific plant. Generally, each species has only one plant that is its host plant. And so I had to grow those plants so that the eggs could be laid on them. And then when the eggs hatch, the little tiny caterpillars are right on their food plant, so they can immediately start eating. And then they essentially molt 4 to 5 times, become adult caterpillars, and then go into their chrysalis stage, and then emerge as adults. So growing the plants was a great challenge. And this thing we're looking at is a hydroponic plant growing rack that I developed in the studio. Next. So this is another shot of that end of the studio, which really became a little butterfly research laboratory. And I was guided in all of this by one of the leading lepidopterists in the US, who I'd been introduced to, a man named Rudy Mattoni, who was in his late 80s, and decided that I would be a good project for him, a good retirement project. So he gave me a crash course in butterfly biology, and helped me develop this entire kind of crazy system, which I wound up calling the butterfly machine. So it was again, it was a sort of an indoor ecosystem for breeding butterflies. Next. And so it also extended outside. So these are, again, hydroponically supported window boxes that we built. And this is, they're cantilevered out of the windows of my loft in Long Island City during the summer. And this is basically all to grow, plants that are considered weeds. So it became a very, very elaborate and very expensive and labor-intensive way of growing weeds. Next. And here's a shot back in the studio of cabbage white caterpillars feeding on a cabbage there in a early stage of life. Next. And then this is a common buckeye, which was probably the species I was most successful with, and very beautiful butterflies. So we raised, I think I had 11 generations of this butterfly. I had them going through an entire year, which felt like quite a success.
Amazing.
Next. Yeah, it was really neat. So this all culminated in an exhibition in my New York gallery, and here's where we moved the laboratory into the gallery space. And this was all really meant to comment on climate change and habitat destruction. And what I learned in this, multiple year project is that it's very, very hard to create habitat for anything. I mean, for in this case for butterflies, and that human efforts to do this are almost futile, and essentially there's no way to replicate or replace the natural systems that support this web of life that we're all part of. So it was kind of a crazy experience of it was Sisyphusian in its nature. Next. And I think, yeah, so this is another part of the gallery, and there's that figure that I spoke of earlier. What we were doing during the course of the exhibition was breeding butterflies, and then each day transferring some number of butterflies into the interior of this figure sculpture that's on the right. Next. Great. And so there are two shots of butterflies within the sculpture. And the metaphor here is really very simple for me. It was simply that there isn't this notion that we have, that we as human beings are separate from the rest of kingdom Animalia is wrong. I mean, there really isn't a separation between us and all other living things. I mean, we do exactly what all the large mammals do in terms of breeding and raising offspring and eating and defecating and our drinking water. Our needs are precisely the same as most of the mammals on Earth. And yet, because we have credit cards and car keys and cell phones, we somehow forget that we are part of the natural world. So this was simply an attempt to say that, no, we're all one. The butterflies are in us, we're in the butterflies. There really is no difference. Next. Oh, so this is just backing up back into the studio to give you a glimpse of how that sculpture got made. And that involved, being wrapped in plaster and stand still for an hour and 45 minutes while this plaster mold set up. And then that mold, allowed me to build the steel sculpture right into it. Next.
Which of course we have on our balcony.
You'll recognize. Right, and that's, I think, the next shot. There we are. So that after that sculpture was a home to live butterflies, it kind of got repurposed, and this is located out there on the balcony at the Taubman. And the attempt here was to actually create an incentive for birds to come and enter the sculpture, trying to get that same relationship, trying to get some animal to exist within the figure. And I don't think we were met with too much success there. I think there's one or two photographs of birds inside the sculpture during its stay there at the Taubman, but we shall see. Next. So I'm going to just give you a glimpse of a few things that were also in the show at the Taubman. And this is the piece Aerialist, a set of wall-mounted wings comprised of 300 chef's knives. So this is a process shot, just starting to build the first of the wings there on a form. And let's go to the next one. There's the finished piece in the studio. And next. And this is actually a shot of a piece that was also in the show called Lepidopterist. Again, kind of trying to take that image of the human figure and meld it with images from the natural world to suggest this lack of separation between Homo sapiens and everything else on the planet. but this was the image that was used for that United Nations Postal Service stamp, which is the next image. So this was part of a series of stamps issued on Earth Day this year, which was the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. And the UN selected 6 artists and did stamps with each of us for that. So that was really a lovely thing to occur.
Congratulations.
Of course, because of Corona. Yeah, thank you. Okay, next, and I think what we have next are images of Flower Bomber. So we've got some images in the studio here in Long Island City. And, this is not a huge studio. I mean, just large enough to kind of accommodate the sculpture as it was being assembled and built there. We really had to kind of shoehorn it into the space. It became a great plaything for my then 7-year-old, who was, just the right size to get into the thing and climb around inside it.
What a fabulous playground for a child to be in.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, he of course takes it for granted. It's just the way it is, right? There just happens to be a 2/3 scale B-25 bomber in the studio for him to hang out in. So, I mean, everyone has one of those, right? Next. And just here's a shot of starting to put the fiberglass skin on the wooden structure for the airplane. Next. And of course, he gets to play, but I also put him to work a little bit. And here he's learning to use a pneumatic riveting tool to help rivet the skin onto the airplane. And we had, I think, about 3,000 rivets to put the skin onto this structure. So I put him right to work. Next. And there it is. I think this is our last image here. A beautiful early morning shot with the light raking down low through the glass atrium and lighting up the sculpture in a very interesting way.
And we had, of course, 3,000 flowers that cascaded down to on the floor in a sculpture itself on the atrium travertine.
Yeah, and of course, it took 6 months to make the 3,000 flowers, but what I realized immediately upon doing that installation is I needed another 10 or 15,000 to really make it work. So maybe in its next life we'll make another 10,000 flowers for it.
Now, so you're in the Catskills?
Yes, we are. We're in the Borscht Belt here in New York, and like I said, well, let me back up. We bought this house 3 years ago as a weekend house, and within a year of that, my partner Amy said, "I don't want to live in the loft anymore. I just want to stay here." And we found a wonderful little progressive school for my son up here, which has kind of been the artist school. I mean, like Martin Puryear's kids have gone there, and Gregory Amanoff's kids, and it's kind of the artist school in the Hudson Valley. So we got him in there and moved up here, and then of course the pandemic arrived this spring, and we just stayed put up here. So I'm in the process of, like I mentioned, trying to buy a small empty department store building in the village here to move my studio up. But right now, and let me see if I can flip the camera around on this.
Well, and while you do that, we're going to go ahead with the video and show the drone video too, so that we can get a feel.
Yes, perfect. I forgot we had that. Yep. Why don't you go right ahead and do that? Yeah.
And Paul, this is showing your home in the Catskills as you're coming on an acre and a half. Just a beautiful space.
Yes, thank you. It's that house was built in 1965 by a local architect who had a fascination with kind of this, creating an open plan and using big glulam beams to support the structures so that they are quite open. And it's kind of an upside down house. The ground floor, the bottom floor, are the go upstairs to. And this is kind of a marvelous video. I have a good friend who's been a pioneer, point of view drone flights, and so he's developed this little tiny drone. Thing is about, it's about 4 inches by 4 inches, and it's capable of flying around indoor space. So he and his family were visiting, and he said, "Let me photograph your house." And we opened a couple of doors, and he took off from the front lawn, flew in through a window, flew around the ground floor. Now he's flying upstairs, and just passes through the house and back outside and back inside. And
Give me a smile.
It really looks like a tree house.
well, that's exactly what we call it. Right after we bought it, my partner Amy said, "I think we should call it Treehouse." And then I was corresponding with the former owner, the family that built the house, and he said, "Yeah, we called it Treehouse." And so I said, "Well, that's obviously what it is. There's, it can't be called anything else." And it really is. I mean, it's really up in the trees. It's designed so that trees grow through the decks, both at the front and the back of the house, or literally come right up through the decks. And it's really a neat place. Both Amy and I, have a strong penchant for modernist architecture and mid-century modern architecture, and there simply aren't a lot of houses like this in this part of the world. I mean, and so we were keeping our eyes open for several years, and when we found this, we bought it. We went to look at it and just bought it right away, basically.
It sounds
Little
like
did I know that we'd be living here full time.
Well, and that goes into a question that just came up from Sharon. And how does your environment affect your work? The tree house versus the city loft?
Well, it's a little too early to tell right now, I think. I mean, I'm sure that it. Let me flip the camera around here. I mean, I'm sure that it will affect me, but I've always moved pretty freely between the city and and the outdoor world, and my work has always had a great deal to do with naturalist sort of imagery. So I think we'll see what the effects are, but right now it just makes a lot of sense to be here.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think we're going to go ahead and move on to your home studio, where you're working in your space here.
Yeah. So like I said, I'm kind of in between the place in this city that you saw photographs of, and then this should be our dining room, and this is actually what I my workspace right here in the house. And so this is a piece that I've just finished this morning, and it incorporates, an antique Louis XV style frame, and of course the aluminum butterflies made from cans collected from the streets of New York. And this one is white on white, which has kind of gotten interesting in terms of the pieces having a more ephemeral quality. They change a great deal depending on how they're lit. And I will just walk you through the curated crib here and show you a few things. Like I mentioned, the house is 1965. We bought it and we really didn't want to do anything to it. We wanted to just keep it as it is, basically. But here is another piece of mine. This is, I've done some pieces that use butterflies to create textual phrases. This piece says "your name," and the butterflies and plant forms are attached to a kind of a steel structure made out of 1/8-inch steel rod, and you can see sort of the wires that support the butterfly elements going into the steel rod that I welded up in the studio.
Well, Paul, and talk about the accident that happened that influenced your process.
Oh yes, so these butterflies are blackened. They are aluminum cans, beer and soda cans, and in some instances you can see a bit of the color coming through the this finish, which is candle soot. Essentially, the aluminum elements are held in the flame of a candle to collect the soot, and then that is fixed onto the aluminum. And this came up because I had an early piece, I guess nearly 20 years ago now, and it was exhibited out of town, and my brother was helping me move the piece back. It was 125 butterflies made out of Budweiser cans. So my brother had this packed in the trunk of his car. We were moving it from Connecticut back to New York City, and his car caught on fire. And I thought the piece was a complete loss because the car was a complete loss. But a week later, he showed up at my studio with a little paper bag, and in it was this blackened sort of ball of aluminum bits. And I kind of teased that apart. And there were these, butterfly forms that had been turned from Budweiser cans into this beautiful, they had this beautiful black patina. And wings were kind of charred, and bits were melted off. But these butterflies that came out of this, the 25 or so that survived were just far more beautiful than they were originally. I mean, vastly more beautiful for having literally gone through the fire. And so I spent a few years trying to figure out how to recreate that finish. And I got out the propane torch and tried to hit them with the torch, and that didn't work. And I remember putting some of these butterfly elements under the broiler in my kitchen for 2 days, and that didn't work. And I finally, I joke now that I thought I was going to have to burn up a Toyota Corolla once a year in order to do this. And I finally just stumbled on holding the thing in the flame of a candle. And so, well, it's not quite the same. It sort of gives the a similar effect. It's a very, it's a very painful way to turn black. I mean, it's, I also joke that if there's a harder way to do something, I will find it and do it that way. So that's the backstory there. So I'm just going to walk you through the house. I mentioned that it's kind of this open plan space, and there are these big beams that hold up the roof and the floors here. And let's see. I'm going to show you one of Amy's paintings here. My partner, Amy Park, is a painter who works primarily with watercolor on paper, but on a very large scale. So this is, I think this is about 40 by 60 inches. And this is an earlier painting of hers. She kind of specializes in defying the nature of watercolor painting, and that she does these kind of precisionist, hard-edged paintings that are generally generally involve architectural imagery, and they're definitely not the sort of flowy, loose, abstracted kind of images that we often associate with watercolor. So that's one of her pieces that hangs here. And let's continue on here. No fire in the fireplace tonight. We need to do that. I mentioned my Lepidopterist friend, Rudy Mattoni, who was actually a butterfly geneticist. And he collected specimens for many, many years, and basically has given me half of his collection, which is in various places. So it's kind of neat stuff to live with. And half of his collection is at Harvard, and the other half is with us. And let's just pop in here to the green bathroom. This is a funny little kind of gallery of my work. So this is a painting that my mother recently gave me that I did when I was 8 or 9 years old on a piece of driftwood. So using found materials from the start. Here's a little etching that I did some years ago. And this, I think, is an amusing piece. This is a fan that was made for a show of artist-made fans. And I took rejection letters that I had received over 15 years or so and collaged them into this, made this collage with them, which then was turned into this fan. I regret to inform you that your application is not one of those selected for further consideration. So
that kind of transitions to that concept of bringing in paper and pulping it for the flight that you did at the museum.
Right. Yeah. I think we all wind up working with paper in various ways because it's such a ubiquitous material for artists. So this is Amy's workspace in our house. And Amy, do you want to come in here and say a quick hello? Amy's been working on a series of works based on the artist Ed Ruscha's photographs for a number of years now.
Hi.
Here, there she is. Do you want to say something about these?
Sure. These are all paintings that are based on the 34 parking lot artist book. I've actually been working with books from Ed's studio, from his collection. He's been really generous to me and supportive. This is, I think, the 3rd or 4th book I've done, but it's kind of a project that keeps going, and there are so many of his books. So we'll see how many years it'll take me to make a painting of every single one of his photographs.
And do you want to talk about this over here as well? Here's Lark. He's sneaking around behind us here.
Hello, Lark.
This is another one. This is another book that I have started. It is the what is it? The LA Apartments book. So there's 34 different photographs, 34 or 35 in this book as well too. So this is one that I just started.
So here's like a source image. This is one of Ruscha's photographs of the LA buildings, and this is Amy's painting in process. And Yeah.
And Amy, has your process, has your outlook changed, or your art it changed in any way as you've moved to the Catskills space versus being in the city and then, working on this project?
Yeah, not really. I think that the only thing that's changed is maybe the paintings have gotten more colorful, but I've always been interested in architecture. A lot of the paintings that I've made in the past have had some natural elements to them, but I don't think it's changed too much. I will say though that it's hard to work in the studio because it's so beautiful outside. I just find myself staring out the window. You can't see it right now.
You can't tell but, what it looks like now, obviously.
Well, we saw it through the drone though as we were moving through the the space. So I can imagine.
It's really, really beautiful. But I used to stare out the window and look at the East River and the city. So
yeah, interestingly, so this house is about half glass. The exterior, there's just glass everywhere and a lot of it. And the building that we are hoping to get in the village here is this old department store that has a storefront, but otherwise it has no windows at all. So it'll be sort of the opposite. It'll be a very interior space, where we can just focus on what it is right in front of us. And the house is all about looking outward. The studio will be all about looking inward. And this is a painting by Amy's mentor, Michelle Grabner. With some glare on it, not optimal. Here, I'll go in though. These are made by painting through fabric with enamel paint.
And that one's a metal grid.
Oh, right through. In this case, through a metal grid. But Michelle Grabner is a well-known artist who is also a teacher at the Art Institute and a curator and a writer about art, a critic. And she has given Amy, how many? 4 or 5 paintings? So we're enjoying them now, but I'm planning on selling them at auction so I can put my son through college down the road. It's the Michelle Grabner College Fund.
Looks like you have a strategy in place. So
I do. I mean, I say that now, but so I'll just whisk you downstairs, and I'm really just showing you around our house as though your old friends or family members who have not seen the place yet. And I see my son just closed his door. Can we come in, Lark? Oh, sure, he says. Okay. Going into Abbey Road here. And were you going to play for us? No? No bass guitar? No. Okay. Well, we'll just take a quick peek in here. This is it's been sort of fun. This is a very early painting of mine from, I think, 1987. And it's 1/3 of a large triptych. And fun to hang in my son's room because he is all about bass guitar right now. So.
And you then transitioned from painting to sculpture within your career time frame.
I did. I mean, the first almost 20 years I was a painter. I mean, what happened is that I realized I was enjoying building the stretchers more than making the paintings, that I really wanted to work with my hands. And I started to build furniture objects that stood in front of the paintings and extended the world of the paintings right out into the viewer's physical space. And then I realized, with some help from my friends, that I didn't need the paintings anymore, that the objects themselves were more interesting. And that brought me right into the world of sculpture. Here's another Amy's paintings. And we've spent some time out in Marfa, Texas, when my son was just before he turned 3, right? Two and a half. Yeah, we've made a couple trips out there, but we spent 3 months there in a little rented shack, basically a little casita, working. And Amy did a bunch of paintings based at that point on Donald Judd's work. So here are the kind of cast concrete sculptures that he's done that are out in a meadow there in Marfa. And this is a little photo collage of a big sort of public art project I did that started with this basically FEMA trailer. And this was a project I did for the Prospect One Biennial down in New Orleans a year after Hurricane Katrina hit. And I spent a number of months transforming that trailer into a sustainably rebuilt solar and wind powered mobile artist studio. And so it wound up looking kind of like that. And then this was exhibited down in New Orleans, and then kind of traveled to a bunch of other places, including Marfa, Texas. And another very early figurative painting of mine from the late 1980s. And this is the room Lark refers to as his gaming room. You can't hide behind me like that. I will.
Stop turning.
All right. Everyone. More of Amy's paintings here. And then we are whisking around here.
Well, as we're rounding the corner, talk a little bit. You talked about your working with your hands, and you hand cut many of the butterflies for a long period of time before you went to laser cut.
That's correct. Yeah. When I started doing this work, and here's this is a fairly early example. I think the largest part of the work for me was about this act of transforming. Sorry, my phone just said it had a low battery here. Transforming these littered beer cans from the streets of New York into this image of rebirth and transformation that the butterfly is, and doing it through painstaking handwork. Just it was kind of an exercise of I think of it as kind of a simple alchemy, and it was an exploration of just kind of what is possible if you really invest yourself and are willing to really put labor and care and attention into something. But what happened is that body of work with these butterflies really took off and kind of got, it developed a life of its own. And over time, I realized that the handmade quality was less important. And what I needed to do was simply be able to make many more of these butterfly elements. This is another Michelle Grabner painting. And so to that end, we spent a year integrating and assembling a metal cutting laser cutter in my studio in New York, so that I can still use the found aluminum cans, which are, I source them from homeless canners who collect them in Brooklyn. And that's still the material, but now I can use this machine to turn them into the butterfly shapes and other kinds of shapes, which gives me much more material to work with.